The arena lights flickered, casting chaotic patterns across the wrestling ring. Brooke Adams stood in the center, her body rigid with tension. The crowd's deafening chants echoed around her. Yet in that moment, she felt utterly alone. She blinked against the heat of the spotlights, her breath shallow as she prepared for another fight. It wasn't just a match. It was a culmination of everything she had endured. Every scar hidden beneath her skin, the roar of the audience reminded her of the cost of fame, a price she had paid for longer than she cared to admit. The sweat on her brow mixed with the weight of her memories, dragging her mind back to the place where it had all begun. She could almost smell the dusty streets of her childhood home, hear the laughter of children echoing through a quiet Texas town. Brooke had been one of those kids once, running barefoot through fields with her siblings, her dreams as endless as the wide-open sky. But even then, she had known that her small world wasn't enough for her restless spirit. Her earliest memory of ambition came one summer evening, when she stumbled upon a televised wrestling match. She had never seen anything like it. The wrestlers were larger than life, moving with an awe-inspiring mix of grace and brutality. Something stirred deep inside her, a spark that refused to dim. She spent the rest of that night pretending to be a champion, mimicking the moves she had seen, imagining herself under the bright lights with a roaring crowd. It was the first time she felt a calling, a purpose that stretched far beyond her small-town existence. But dreams, she would later learn, were not simple or free. The journey to success was paved with struggle, and Brooke's life was no exception. Her teenage years were marked by relentless determination. She worked part-time jobs and saved every dollar she could to fund her training sessions at a rundown gym on the outskirts of town. The trainers were tough, their words sharp and unsympathetic. Every mistake was met with criticism, and there were moments when Brooke felt the sting of doubt creeping in. Yet, she never let herself quit. She would go home sore and bruised, her body aching from endless drills. Her mother often voiced concern, wondering why Brooke was so obsessed with something that seemed so unattainable. But Brooke kept pushing forward. There were times when the exhaustion felt unbearable, when she questioned if the sacrifices were worth it. She missed family gatherings, lost touch with old friends, and struggled to explain the fire that drove her. The loneliness was suffocating at times. But giving up wasn't an option. Slowly, her hard work began to pay off. Opportunities started to appear. Small at first, local matches, small promotions, a chance to prove herself. Brooke's presence in the ring was magnetic. Her passion bled into every performance, and audiences were drawn to her raw intensity. She learned how to command a crowd, to harness their energy and turn it into fuel. Every cheer reminded her of those nights spent dreaming in front of a flickering television screen. She was finally living the life she had imagined, but with success came new challenges. The wrestling industry was brutal in ways she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about physical endurance. It was about survival in a world filled with politics, betrayals, and rivalries. Brooke had to learn quickly who to trust and who to avoid. The pressure to maintain her image grew heavier with each passing year. Every decision she made, both in and out of the ring, was scrutinized by fans and critics alike. The line between her public persona and her true self blurred, leaving her struggling to maintain a sense of identity. Her relationships suffered the most. Friends who once celebrated her victories grew distant, unable to understand the life she now led. Romantic partners came and went, each one eventually overwhelmed by the demands of her career. Brooke found herself retreating further into isolation, relying only on herself to navigate the storm of fame. She became skilled at hiding her pain behind a mask of confidence. But deep down, the wounds festered. Despite the darkness, there were moments of light, small victories that kept her going. She remembered the first time she won a major championship. The weight of the title belt resting on her shoulders like a crown. The crowd had erupted in celebration, their voices merging into a single, powerful wave of support. In that moment, she had felt invincible. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. Yet, when the adrenaline faded, she was left with a familiar emptiness. Success hadn't filled the void inside her. It had only masked it for a while. As the years went on, Brooke faced injuries that threatened to end her career. Each time she stepped into the ring, she knew she was putting her body on the line. The toll was undeniable: fractures, torn ligaments, chronic pain that never fully disappeared. She pushed through it all, refusing to let her body betray her dreams. But the physical pain was easier to endure than the mental battles. The whispers of self-doubt grew louder in her mind, reminding her of every failure, every missed opportunity. Now, standing on the brink of another defining match, Brooke felt the weight of her journey pressing down on her. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, studying the woman she had become. Her eyes were tired but resolute. She had fought for everything she had, and despite the scars, she was still standing. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the noise of the arena fade into the background. Memories of her younger self danced through her mind, running through fields, dreaming of greatness, chasing a destiny that had always seemed just out of reach. That little girl would be proud of her now. Brooke had lived a dream, even if it had cost her more than she ever expected. With a deep breath, she turned and walked toward the entrance of the arena. The doors opened, and the roar of the crowd enveloped her once more. As she stepped into the blinding lights, she knew one thing for certain: her story was far from over. The fight had only just begun. Brooke Adams was born into a modest family in Texas, the middle child in a house that was always full of noise and activity. Her parents worked tirelessly to make ends meet. Her father was a mechanic who often came home with oil-stained hands and a weary smile. Her mother, a homemaker, juggled the chaos of raising 3 kids with an almost superhuman patience. Despite the struggles, there was love, unspoken but ever-present, woven into the fabric of their lives. Brooke grew up with the belief that hard work was the only way to survive. Life in their small town was predictable. Days were spent going to school, playing outside, and attending church on Sundays. Brooke was naturally adventurous, always climbing trees, racing bikes, and inventing games with her siblings. Yet, even in her happiest moments, she often felt a gnawing sense of restlessness. It was as if she were constantly searching for something more, something the boundaries of her small world couldn't offer. As she entered her teenage years, the divide between her dreams and her reality widened. School was a place where Brooke often felt out of place. She wasn't the type to excel academically or blend easily with the popular crowd. She found solace in sports, where her competitive spirit could shine. Basketball, track, and gymnastics became her outlets, and she earned a reputation as a determined athlete who refused to quit, no matter the odds. But Brooke's passion truly ignited one fateful night when her older brother, Max, introduced her to professional wrestling. He had rented a VHS tape of a major wrestling event, and Brooke sat mesmerized as larger-than-life figures performed gravity-defying stunts. The crowd's energy, the drama of the matches, the sheer spectacle, it all captivated her in a way nothing else had. She spent the rest of the night trying to mimic the moves she had seen, using her mattress as a makeshift wrestling ring. From that moment on, wrestling became her obsession. While other girls her age fantasized about becoming singers or actresses, Brooke dreamed of entering the squared circle, of hearing her name chanted by thousands of fans. Her parents, however, saw things differently. They considered wrestling a dangerous and unrealistic goal. Her father, a man hardened by years of physical labor, warned her that chasing dreams could lead to heartbreak. Her mother quietly hoped that Brooke's fascination would fade in time. But Brooke was nothing if not stubborn. She began training in secret, sneaking out of the house to attend practice sessions at a nearby gym. The facility was far from glamorous. Rusted equipment, flickering fluorescent lights, and a faint odor of sweat that clung to every surface. Yet, to Brooke, it was paradise. The gym owner, an aging former wrestler named Hank, took her under his wing after recognizing her raw potential. He didn't coddle her, though. Training was grueling. Hours were spent perfecting the basics, running drills, learning holds, and enduring endless repetitions of falls and slams. The physical pain was overwhelming at first. Brooke would come home with bruises covering her arms and legs, her muscles screaming in agony. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, wondering if she was truly strong enough to endure the demands of the sport. But every morning, she forced herself out of bed, determined to keep going. She had something to prove, not just to her parents, who doubted her ambitions, but to herself. Her early attempts to balance school, training, and part-time jobs took a toll on her mental and physical health. She barely slept, and her grades suffered as a result. Teachers began to question her focus, and her mother worried that she was pushing herself too hard. Brooke's friends drifted away, unable to relate to her single-minded drive. At times, loneliness consumed her, but she refused to give up. The first time she competed in a local wrestling match, her parents finally saw a glimpse of the passion that drove her. The small venue was packed with enthusiastic fans, and Brooke's heart raced as she stepped into the ring. The bright lights disoriented her at first, but as soon as the bell rang, something clicked. She moved instinctively, her training kicking in. Every slam, every maneuver was fueled by a mix of fear and exhilaration. By the end of the match, her parents watched in awe as the crowd erupted in applause. After the event, her father pulled her aside and spoke words she had waited years to hear. "You've got something special, kid. Just don't lose yourself along the way." It wasn't a full endorsement, but it was enough to keep Brooke going. From that point on, her family became reluctant but supportive allies in her journey. Despite the small victories, Brooke's path was far from smooth. The wrestling industry was a harsh, unforgiving landscape. Female wrestlers, in particular, faced unique challenges. Brooke quickly learned that she would have to work twice as hard to earn half the respect of her male counterparts. Promoters often pushed women into roles that emphasized their looks over their athletic ability, something that infuriated Brooke. She had no intention of being reduced to eye candy. She wanted to be taken seriously as a competitor, someone whose skills and grit could stand on their own merit. Hank warned her that the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. "You'll have to fight for every inch of respect," he said one night after a tough training session. "But if anyone can do it, it's you." His words stayed with her as she began climbing the ranks of the local wrestling scene. Each match brought new challenges, fierce opponents, injuries, and the constant pressure to prove herself. The turning point came when a talent scout from a well-known wrestling promotion attended one of her matches. Impressed by her charisma and athleticism, he offered her a tryout. It was the opportunity Brooke had been waiting for, but it also came with a daunting choice. Accepting the offer meant leaving behind the familiar comforts of her hometown and stepping into an uncertain future. Fear threatened to paralyze her, but deep down, she knew that staying would mean settling for a life of what-ifs. Brooke packed her bags and left for the tryout, carrying nothing but a duffel bag of essentials and a heart full of hope. As the train sped away from her small Texas town, she stared out the window and made a silent promise to herself. no matter what happened. She would never give up on her dream. The future was a blank canvas, and she was ready to paint it with blood, sweat, and tears if necessary. What awaited her in the world beyond was a whirlwind of challenges and triumphs, moments that would test every fiber of her being. But for now, all Brooke knew was that she was finally on her way, chasing the dream that had once seemed impossible. Arriving at the tryout, Brooke was greeted by a sea of intimidating faces, wrestlers from all over the country, each determined to prove they had what it took to make it in the business. The atmosphere was electric, charged with a mix of nervous energy and fierce competition. Brooke couldn't afford to show fear. She squared her shoulders, tightened her ponytail, and stepped into the gym with her head held high. It was her time to make an impression. The tryout was brutal from the start. Hours of conditioning drills left her gasping for breath, her limbs trembling with exhaustion. Coaches barked commands without mercy, testing not only their physical limits, but also their mental toughness. Brooke's years of relentless training served her well. She pushed through the pain, her determination shining through every grueling exercise. She wasn't the strongest or the tallest, but her tenacity set her apart. By the end of the session, she had earned the attention of key trainers and promoters. Still, the path ahead wasn't easy. Brooke quickly learned that professional wrestling wasn't just about athleticism. It was about storytelling, charisma, and the ability to connect with an audience. Promoters emphasized the importance of creating a persona that could captivate fans. Brooke struggled at first to find her identity in the ring. Who was she meant to be? The pressure to fit into a marketable image weighed heavily on her. She faced constant feedback. You need to be more aggressive, smile more, be sexier. Each critique chipped away at her confidence. During one particularly harsh meeting with creative executives, Brooke hit a breaking point. They dismissed her ideas and insisted on casting her in a superficial, stereotypical role. Frustrated and disheartened, she considered walking away from it all. But a conversation with a veteran wrestler changed her perspective. The woman, known as the Queen of the Ring, shared her own struggles with identity in the industry. You have to take control of your narrative, she advised. Be who you are, not who they tell you to be. If you don't believe in yourself, no one else will. Inspired by those words, Brooke returned to training with renewed focus. She experimented with different personas, eventually crafting an image that reflected both her strength and vulnerability. She became the Phoenix, a symbol of resilience and rebirth. Her entrance music, costume, and moves all embodied her journey, rising from the ashes of doubt and failure. Fans responded with enthusiasm. They saw a piece of themselves in her story and rallied behind her with passion. Her career gained momentum as she began winning high-profile matches. One of the most pivotal moments came during a championship tournament. Brooke faced off against a seasoned rival known for her cunning tactics and brutal style. The match was a test of endurance and strategy. Brooke endured punishing blows, her body aching with every slam to the mat. But she refused to back down. As the match reached its climax, she delivered a signature move, a high-flying maneuver that left the crowd in awe and secured the victory. The championship belt was placed in her hands, and for a brief moment, all the sacrifices felt worth it. She stood in the center of the ring, tears streaming down her face as the crowd roared her name. It was a moment of triumph that she would never forget. Yet, in the days that followed, she was haunted by an unsettling realization. The victory hadn't filled the void inside her. She still felt the weight of loneliness and doubt pressing down on her. Success, she discovered, was not a cure for her inner struggles. The next turning point came when Brooke sustained a serious injury during a match. A botched landing left her with a torn ACL, and the doctors warned that her recovery could take months. For someone whose identity was so closely tied to wrestling, The injury was devastating. She spiraled into a period of depression, questioning whether she would ever return to the ring. The physical pain was excruciating, but the mental toll was far worse. For the first time in years, she was forced to confront herself without the distractions of her career. Rehabilitation was a long and grueling process. Brooke threw herself into physical therapy with the same intensity she had once brought to training. She slowly rebuilt her strength, celebrating small victories like being able to walk without crutches or complete a full set of squats. The journey was humbling, but it taught her the importance of patience and self-compassion. She learned to redefine her sense of worth, realizing that she was more than just her achievements. During this time, Brooke reconnected with her family. She spent weeks at home, surrounded by the people who had been her foundation from the beginning. Her mother's quiet support and her father's words of wisdom reminded her of who she truly was beneath the spotlight. Old wounds were healed, and strained relationships began to mend. Brooke started to see herself not just as a wrestler, but as a daughter, a sister, and a person deserving of love and belonging. When she finally returned to the ring, it was with a newfound sense of purpose. Her comeback match was one of the most anticipated events of the year. Fans packed the arena, eager to see if the Phoenix could rise once more. Brooke entered the arena to thunderous applause, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The match was a brutal test of her resilience, but she emerged victorious, proving to herself and the world that she was stronger than ever. The experience reshaped her approach to life and her career. She became an advocate for mental health awareness, sharing her story with fans and encouraging others to seek help when needed. She used her platform to inspire others, reminding them that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about the courage to face your fears and embrace your vulnerabilities. Brooke's journey was far from over, but she had reached a turning point that would define the next chapter of her life. She had learned that true greatness wasn't measured by titles or accolades, but by the ability to overcome adversity and remain true to oneself. The fire that had driven her since childhood still burned brightly, but now it was tempered by wisdom and self-awareness. She was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. With her comeback complete, Brooke Adams became a force to be reckoned with in the wrestling world. Her reputation as the Phoenix spread like wildfire. Fans admired her tenacity, while industry insiders recognized her as a rising star with the potential to dominate the sport for years to come. The bookings poured in: major promotions, television appearances, sponsorship deals. Brooke was finally living the dream she had once envisioned. Yet, the price of that dream grew heavier with each passing day. Her schedule became relentless. Brooke traveled from city to city, barely spending more than a night in the same hotel room. Early mornings were filled with promotional events, autograph signings, and interviews. Afternoons were consumed by training sessions and meetings with creative teams. By evening, she was back in the ring, performing under the bright lights and deafening cheers. Despite the exhaustion, she poured everything she had into each performance. The adrenaline rush was addictive, but it masked a growing fatigue that gnawed at the edges of her mind. Success also brought increased scrutiny. Every aspect of her life became public fodder. Tabloids speculated about her personal relationships, while critics dissected her performances with ruthless precision. Brooke learned to wear a mask of composure, smiling through invasive questions and keeping her true feelings hidden. She often wondered if the version of herself that the world saw was real or just another character she had created for survival. The high-pressure environment began to take its toll on her mental health. Brooke developed a habit of pushing through her emotions, telling herself that vulnerability was a weakness she couldn't afford. She rarely confided in anyone, even as anxiety and self-doubt crept in during quiet moments. There were nights when she lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of failure. What if she couldn't sustain her momentum? What if one wrong move sent her crashing down from the heights she had worked so hard to reach? Despite these fears, Brooke continued to excel in the ring. She participated in high-profile storylines that elevated her status. Rivalries with other top wrestlers became legendary, each match carefully crafted to keep audiences on the edge of their seats. One of the most memorable feuds was with a wrestler known as the Iron Queen. The two women had a natural chemistry that translated into explosive matches filled with drama and intensity. Their rivalry culminated in a championship bout that became one of the most watched events in wrestling history. As her fame grew, Brooke faced increasing pressure to maintain her physical appearance. The wrestling industry, while evolving, still placed an unfair emphasis on aesthetics, especially for female competitors. Brooke found herself under constant scrutiny regarding her weight, appearance, and fashion choices. She began to obsess over her diet and fitness routine, pushing her body to extremes in an effort to meet unrealistic standards. Friends and colleagues noticed the changes, but Brooke brushed off their concerns, convincing herself that perfection was a necessary part of the job. Her breaking point came during a grueling overseas tour. Brooke was in the middle of a match when her body finally gave out. The pain in her lower back, which she had been ignoring for weeks, became unbearable. She collapsed to the mat. Unable to continue, the referee quickly signaled for medical assistance as the audience watched in stunned silence. Brooke was rushed backstage, where doctors determined that she had suffered a serious spinal injury. The diagnosis was a wake-up call. Brooke was ordered to take an extended break from wrestling to undergo surgery and physical therapy. For the first time in years, she was forced to slow down and confront the reality she had been avoiding. The months that followed were a period of deep reflection. Brooke realized that she had been living on autopilot, sacrificing her well-being for the sake of success. She had become trapped in a cycle of constant performance, afraid to stop and face herself. During her recovery, Brooke began working with a therapist who helped her unpack years of unresolved trauma and self-imposed pressure. The sessions were painful but necessary. She confronted the insecurities that had driven her since childhood, the fear of not being enough, the need to prove her worth through external achievements. Gradually, she learned to redefine her relationship with success. It wasn't about perfection or public approval. It was about staying true to her values and finding balance in her life. As her body healed, Brooke also focused on rebuilding her personal life. She reconnected with friends she had lost touch with and began mending broken relationships. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to experience joy outside of wrestling. She traveled for pleasure instead of work, explored hobbies she had long neglected, and spent quality time with her family. These moments grounded her, reminding her of the importance of living fully in the present. When Brooke finally returned to the ring, she did so on her own terms. She had learned to set boundaries and prioritize her well-being. Her new approach didn't diminish her passion for wrestling. It enhanced it. She brought a renewed energy and focus to her performances, captivating audiences with her storytelling and athleticism. Fans noticed the difference. Brooke seemed more confident, more authentic than ever before. Her comeback was marked by a series of matches that showcased her evolution as both a wrestler and a person. One of the highlights was a match against a rising star who reminded Brooke of her younger self, hungry, determined, and fearless. The two women delivered a performance that celebrated both competition and camaraderie. After the match, Brooke raised her opponent's hand in a gesture of respect, symbolizing the passing of the torch to a new generation of talent. Brooke's success extended beyond the ring. She became an advocate for athletes' mental and physical health, sharing her story with honesty and vulnerability. She spoke at conferences, participated in charity events, and collaborated with organizations focused on wellness and empowerment. Her journey resonated with people from all walks of life, inspiring them to pursue their dreams without sacrificing their well-being. The rise to success had been anything but linear for Brooke Adams. She had faced heartbreak, injuries, and moments of doubt that threatened to derail her dreams. Yet, through it all, she had remained resilient. Her story was one of transformation, not just from underdog to champion, but from a woman defined by her ambition to someone who had found peace within herself. The fire that once burned solely for victory now fueled a deeper purpose, to uplift others and leave a lasting legacy. For all her success, Brooke Adams struggled with relationships. The demands of her career often left little room for meaningful connections. Wrestling was an all-consuming world, a cycle of travel, training, and performance that made it difficult to maintain friendships, let alone romantic relationships. Brooke learned early on that many people were drawn to her fame, but few were willing to understand the sacrifices it required. Her relationship with her family was a complex one. Despite their early doubts, her parents grew proud of her achievements. Yet, there was an unspoken tension that lingered between them. They worried about her well-being, but felt unsure of how to help. Brooke, in turn, found it difficult to open up. She didn't want to burden them with her struggles. When she visited home, she played the role of the successful daughter, deflecting questions about her health and happiness with practiced ease. Her bond with her siblings remained stronger. Max, her older brother, had always been her biggest supporter. They often spoke late at night when Brooke was on the road, his voice a comforting reminder of home. Max understood her in a way few others did. He had watched her journey from the beginning and knew how hard she fought for everything she had. During one of their calls, he voiced his concern, saying, "Brooke, you've got to take care of yourself. You're running yourself into the ground." She brushed off his worries, promising she was fine, even though deep down, she knew he was right. Romantically, Brooke's life was turbulent. Relationships were often fleeting, marred by misunderstandings and the pressures of her career. She tried dating a fellow wrestler once, believing that someone from her world would understand her struggles. At first, it was exhilarating, late-night conversations about their dreams, shared moments on the road, but the relationship quickly soured. The competitiveness between them became toxic, and their schedules pulled them in different directions. The breakup was messy, leaving Brooke disillusioned about finding love within the industry. Outside of wrestling, dating was equally challenging. Potential partners struggled to understand the intensity of her lifestyle. Some resented her long absences and erratic schedule, while others were intimidated by her fame. Brooke often felt like she was living two separate lives, the public figure admired by fans and the private woman searching for connection. She began to question whether she was destined to be alone, trapped by the very dream she had fought so hard to achieve. One relationship stood out as a turning point. Brooke met Daniel, a physical therapist she was introduced to during her recovery from injury. Unlike others, Daniel wasn't enamored by her fame. He treated her with kindness and patience, encouraging her to take care of herself without judgment. Their bond grew slowly, built on mutual respect and honesty. Daniel became a grounding presence in Brooke's life, reminding her that she was more than just her career. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to be vulnerable, sharing her fears and insecurities with someone who truly listened. But even this relationship wasn't without its struggles. Brooke's career continued to demand sacrifices, and the distance between them became a source of tension. They had heated arguments over missed calls and canceled plans. Daniel, though supportive, admitted that it was hard to feel like a priority in her life. "I love you, Brooke, but sometimes it feels like wrestling is the only thing that matters to you." He said during one particularly emotional conversation. His words hit a nerve, forcing Brooke to confront the choices she had made. The turning point came when Daniel gave her an ultimatum, not to quit wrestling, but to find a better balance. You can't keep running on empty, he told her. If you want this to work, you have to let people in. Brooke took his words to heart. She began setting boundaries in her professional life, turning down opportunities that would stretch her too thin. It wasn't easy. Saying no felt like a betrayal of her own ambition, but she knew it was necessary for her mental and emotional health. Her efforts paid off. Brooke and Daniel's relationship strengthened as she learned to prioritize her personal life. They found ways to support each other. Even during the most chaotic periods of her career, Brooke also reconnected with friends she had lost touch with over the years. She made time for small, meaningful moments, coffee dates, late-night phone calls, quiet evenings spent with loved ones. These connections became her anchor, helping her stay grounded amidst the whirlwind of fame. Despite these positive changes, conflict still arose within the wrestling industry. Brooke's assertiveness, particularly in advocating for better treatment of female wrestlers, made her a target for criticism. She clashed with promoters who resisted change, often standing alone in boardrooms full of skeptical men. Some saw her as difficult, while others admired her courage. Brooke didn't back down, even when it cost her opportunities. She knew that paving the way for future generations was more important than short-term success. Her most publicized conflict came when she confronted a powerful executive who had been accused of exploiting female talent. Brooke's decision to speak out sparked controversy, dividing the wrestling community. Some colleagues praised her bravery, while others feared retaliation and distanced themselves from her. The media seized on the story, framing it as a scandal. Brooke endured weeks of negative press, but she refused to be silenced. In interviews, she spoke candidly about the need for reform, using her platform to push for accountability. The backlash was intense, but it ultimately led to positive change. Policies were revised, and conversations about gender equality in wrestling gained momentum. Brooke became a symbol of resilience not just for fans, but for her peers. She proved that standing up for what was right could make a difference, even in a world as cutthroat as professional wrestling. These experiences shaped Brooke in profound ways. She learned to navigate conflict with grace and strength, understanding that growth often came from the hardest moments. Her relationships with family, friends, and herself became the foundation that allowed her to thrive. She no longer felt trapped by her dreams. Instead, she embraced them with a new sense of purpose. Brooke Adams had fought for everything she had, and now she was finally at peace with both the woman in the ring and the one outside of it. Brooke sat alone in her hotel room, staring out at the city lights. It had been years since she first stepped into the wrestling ring, wide-eyed and determined to conquer the world. Now, she was a veteran, a household name admired by millions. Yet, as she reflected on her journey, she couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. The ambitions that once fueled her every move no longer consumed her. Instead, she had found something more meaningful: peace. The road to redemption had been anything but easy. Brooke's turning point had come not in the arena, but in moments of solitude, those quiet nights when she was forced to confront her deepest fears. She remembered one particular night during her recovery from injury, lying awake and questioning her entire purpose. Wrestling had been her identity for so long that she didn't know who she was without it. The thought terrified her, but slowly, through therapy, reflection, and support from her loved ones, she discovered that her worth wasn't tied to her achievements. The realization was liberating. Brooke began to redefine success on her own terms. She no longer sought validation through titles or accolades. Instead, She focused on living authentically and nurturing the parts of herself she had neglected. She embraced vulnerability, learning that it was a source of strength rather than weakness. In opening up to others, she found a deeper sense of connection and belonging. One of the most powerful moments of redemption came when Brooke was invited to speak at a mental health awareness event. Standing before an audience filled with athletes, fans, and survivors of trauma, she shared her story with raw honesty. She spoke about the pressures of fame, the injuries that nearly ended her career, and the mental battles she had fought in silence. As she recounted her struggles, she noticed tears in the eyes of those listening. Her words resonated with people who had felt the same isolation and pain. After her speech, fans approached her with stories of their own. A young woman tearfully thanked Brooke for inspiring her to seek help for depression. A father spoke about how his daughter had found hope through Brooke's journey. These interactions moved Brooke in ways she hadn't anticipated. She realized that her greatest impact wasn't in the matches she won, but in the lives she touched through her vulnerability and courage. Brooke's personal growth also strengthened her professional presence. She returned to wrestling with a renewed perspective, no longer driven by the need to prove herself. Her performances were richer, more nuanced. She used the ring as a platform to tell stories of resilience and triumph. Drawing from her own experiences, her matches became events that fans eagerly anticipated, not just for the athletic spectacle, but for the emotional depth she brought to them. Her relationships flourished as well. Brooke and Daniel found a rhythm that worked for them, balancing their individual goals with their commitment to each other. They made time for shared experiences, weekend getaways, quiet nights at home, and simple moments of joy. Brooke no longer felt the pressure to be perfect in their relationship. Instead, she allowed herself to be seen, flaws and all. Daniel's unwavering support reminded her that she was worthy of love just as she was. Her bond with her family deepened too. Brooke's parents, once worried about the path she had chosen, now expressed their pride openly. Her father, who had always been a man of few words, surprised her with a heartfelt letter. In it, he wrote about how her resilience had inspired him, how watching her rise and fall and rise again had taught him the importance of chasing dreams despite the risks. Brooke read the letter through tears, feeling a sense of closure that had eluded her for years. Brooke also took time to mentor younger wrestlers. She saw pieces of her younger self in them, the same hunger, the same fire in their eyes. She guided them with kindness and honesty, sharing lessons she had learned the hard way. Protect your mind and your heart. She often told them, this business can chew you up if you let it, but if you stay true to yourself, you'll come out stronger. One protege in particular, a promising rookie named Alexa, became a close friend. Brooke saw in Alexa the potential to carry on the legacy of strong, authentic women in wrestling. Their friendship extended beyond the ring, with Brooke offering guidance not just on technique, but on navigating the pressures of fame. Alexa often credited Brooke with helping her stay grounded. "You saved me from myself," she said after a difficult match. Brooke smiled, knowing that the real strength came from within Alexa all along. As Brooke reflected on these moments, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The hardships that had once seemed insurmountable had shaped her into the woman she was today. She had faced pain, fear, and doubt, but she had also discovered resilience, empathy, and purpose. Her story wasn't one of perfection. It was one of growth, transformation, and redemption. Now, as she prepared for one of the final matches of her career, Brooke felt at peace with whatever lay ahead. The arena lights would soon shine on her once more, and the crowd would chant her name. But this time, she carried a quiet confidence within her. She no longer needed the applause to validate her existence. She was enough, simply as herself. When the bell rang, signaling the start of the match, Brooke smiled. This wasn't just another fight. It was a celebration of everything she had overcome. She moved with grace and power, her body and mind in perfect harmony. Each moment in the ring felt like poetry, a tribute to the journey that had brought her here. As the final pinfall was counted and the referee raised her hand in victory, Brooke looked out at the cheering crowd. For the first time, she truly saw them, not as an audience to impress, but as people whose lives had been shaped by her story. She raised her hand higher, a symbol of triumph, not just over her opponents, but over the obstacles life had thrown her way. This was her legacy, not just the championships, the fame, or the accolades, but the impact she had made by being honest, vulnerable, and strong. Brooke Adams had risen from the ashes time and time again, and now she stood tall in the light, her story a testament to the power of resilience and redemption. The arena was empty now, the echoes of the cheering crowd fading into silence. Brooke Adams sat on the edge of the ring, her championship belt resting beside her. This was it, the end of a chapter that had defined her life for so many years. Yet, instead of sadness, she felt a calm sense of fulfillment. She had given everything to the sport she loved, and in return, it had shaped her in ways she could never have imagined. Brooke thought back to where it had all begun, the dusty streets of her hometown, the late nights spent dreaming of greatness, the relentless training sessions that pushed her to her limits. She had been a young girl with a fire inside her, determined to prove that she was capable of more than anyone expected. And she had done it. She had risen to the top, fallen, and risen again, each time stronger and more self-assured. The journey had been anything but easy. There were moments of crushing doubt, injuries that threatened to take everything away, and personal sacrifices that left her feeling isolated. But in those darkest moments, Brooke had discovered who she truly was. She learned that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about resilience, vulnerability, and the courage to keep going when everything seemed lost. Looking around the arena now, Brooke felt the weight of her legacy. She knew her story had inspired others, fans, colleagues, and young wrestlers who looked up to her as a role model. She didn't set out to become a symbol of resilience, but it was a role she embraced with pride. She had shown the world that it was possible to chase your dreams without losing yourself, that setbacks were opportunities for growth, and that true greatness lay in the ability to rise after every fall. Brooke's mind drifted to the people who had walked this journey with her, her family, who had been her foundation from the start, always believing in her even when they didn't fully understand her dreams. Daniel, whose love and support had helped her find balance and peace. Max, her brother and confidant, who had always been her biggest fan. And the countless fans who had followed her career, cheering her on through every triumph and every hardship. She smiled softly, remembering the letters and messages she had received over the years, stories from people whose lives had been touched by her own. There was the young woman who overcame depression after hearing Brooke speak about mental health, the wrestler who found the courage to stand up for herself in a male-dominated industry, the father who told Brooke that her story had inspired his daughter to dream bigger than ever before. These were the true rewards of her journey. As the lights dimmed around her, Brooke rose to her feet and took one last look at the ring. It had been her sanctuary and her battlefield, a place where she had faced her fears and discovered her strength. But now it was time to move forward. The next chapter of her life awaited, a chapter filled with new opportunities, new dreams, and new ways to make a difference. Brooke stepped out of the ring and walked toward the arena entrance. She felt a lightness in her heart that she hadn't experienced in years. She no longer needed the spotlight to define her. She was content knowing that she had lived her dream fully and authentically. The fire inside her still burned, but it was no longer driven by the need to prove herself. It was a fire of purpose, fueled by the desire to uplift and inspire others. As she exited the arena, the cool night air greeted her like an old friend. Brooke took a deep breath, savoring the moment. This was freedom, the freedom to be herself, to live without fear, and to embrace whatever the future held. She had come full circle, from a girl chasing dreams to a woman who had found her place in the world. The stars above glittered like tiny reminders of possibility. Brooke smiled to herself and whispered quietly, "Thank you." It wasn't just a thank you to the fans, the sport, or the people who had supported her. It was a thank you to the journey itself, the highs, the lows, the moments of doubt and triumph that had shaped her into the person she was today. With steady steps, she walked into the night, ready for whatever came next. The story of Brooke Adams would continue, not in the ring, but in the lives she touched and the legacy she left behind. She was a testament to the power of resilience, transformation, and redemption. And as long as people needed inspiration, her story would live on. Brooke Adams had risen, fallen, and risen again. And now, she walked forward with grace, knowing that she had already won the greatest match of all, finding herself.